This episode contains specific and graphic information about a crime. Please be advised.
I let Alyssa out of the car and she looked so beautiful. And that would be the last time that I would see Alyssa alive. I received a text message saying shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School. I just grabbed my pocketbook and got my car and drove fast as I could. And I remember asking her where Alyssa was because they were always together. Abby received a text message that Alyssa was shot. And I just fell to the ground. She never made it out of room 1216, where she was shot 8 times in her English classroom. I didn't want Alyssa's death to be in vain. And I'm here to be Alyssa's voice. And every single day, it's my reason to get up and make a difference in this country to help to make our schools safe.
Welcome to True Crime Prevention, the podcast that melds true crime with real solutions. Let's expose how all crime starts the same way, with a chance. Today, we won't give it a chance. I'm Paul DelPonte. I work with McGruff the Crime Dog. Thank you for joining us. Well, today we're going to be joined by Lori Alhadeff from Parkland, Florida. And as soon as I said that, I think you have an idea of where this episode is going. But we're going to go beyond that horrific Valentine's Day and talk about what Lori and others are doing about making our schools safer, which is important. In the meantime, please click like and subscribe. We want you part of the family. Leave your comments. We want to get your ideas on this episode, next episode, what you're doing in your community. So please fill up those comments. Lori, thanks for joining us.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Lori Alhadeff, and I am the CEO of the nonprofit organization Make Our Schools Safe. And a little bit about myself is I went to graduate from the College of New Jersey, health and physical education teacher. I taught for 5 years before having my 3 kids and being a stay-at-home mom for the last 14 years. And then basically my whole life changed after February 14th, 2018, about 7.5 years ago, when the tragedy happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And my daughter Alyssa is amazing. She was so beautiful. She was only 14 years old when she was murdered in our English classroom. She loved to play soccer and she wore the number 8 on her soccer jersey. And when you turn the 8 sideways, it's the infinity symbol, like in our logo, which means forever. So I forever honor Alyssa and live for Alyssa and make sure that we make our school safe for Alyssa.
That is an absolutely sweet way to remember her and give her memory lasting meaning. And that's wonderful. Tell us about that day. I know we can say, oh, we can think about it, but I'm a parent myself. You know, while I would like to rationally say I could think about it and know what it's like, there's no way I could know what it's like. But why don't you tell us about that day, how you found out, what was going through your mind?
So that day was Valentine's Day, and I knew Alyssa wasn't looking forward to the day because she didn't have a Valentine. And so I made it very special for her. I got her a present. It was a gold bag, and I put a chocolate bar in there and diamond earrings. And that morning, I drove Alyssa to school. And before we went to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, we picked up our neighbor, and I got out of the car and I put the earrings in Alyssa's ears. And Alyssa took the chocolate bar, she put it in her backpack, and then she threw the bag onto the floor. Then I drove to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and at the stop sign, I let Alyssa out of the car, and she looked so beautiful. She was wearing a black and white dress, and that would be the last time that I would see Alyssa alive.
Mm.
Later that afternoon, I received a text message saying shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School, kids running and jumping the fence. So in that moment of time, my mind was just spinning. I was besides myself. I just grabbed my pocketbook and got my car and drove fast as I could to the school. I was calling my husband and he wasn't directly picking up, and I just kept calling him frantically, and I was just screaming at him because I just had this sense of loss that came over my body, knowing something that was drastically wrong. Then I ended up parking my car up on a sidewalk because there was all this traffic. Nobody was moving, and all these people were standing around because nobody really knew what was going on. Everybody was just kind of looking at each other. Soon came Alyssa's best friend, Abby. And I remember looking at Abby and then looking at the space next to Abby and asking her where Alyssa was because they were always together. Abby received a text message that Alyssa was shot. And I just fell to the
Mm.
ground and I got up. I ran towards the school and there's a big police officer there with a big gun and he kind of was like pushing me back and I was yelling at him because I trying to understand where to find my daughter, thinking like she's shot. In my mind, I'm thinking she's going to the hospital.
Right.
But she never made it to the hospital. She never made it out of room 1216 where she was shot 8 times in her English classroom.
I'm so sorry for your loss in that day. I could see you starting to tear up, and I was tearing up too, just hearing about you wanting to make that day special for her, as you know, any parent has done that in your child's life. And the other thing that you said that struck me that I think a lot of people don't realize who aren't fortunately not familiar with a crime, certainly a crime of that magnitude, the chaoticness of a crime scene, the aftermath, because at that point in time, no one still fully knows what happened, what the repercussions of it were. You found out rather early, considering what was the sort of the next move? Did you leave the scene, try to get to your husband? Remember?
So my husband met me where I was at that point, and I ended up going with a police officer to the hospital because I was still actively thinking my daughter's in the hospital.
Sure.
And we went there, but unfortunately, she wasn't in the hospital. And then the police officer ended up taking me back in his car to the reunification center. And at that time, there was all this people running around, and they kept putting the people that couldn't find somebody into a certain section and eventually put us in this big ballroom. It was freezing. I was just wearing this little tank top and I just was so cold and my mind was just spinning. And I remember I went into a bathroom and I just started screaming on top of my lungs with just pain and trauma. And we waited for hours upon hours. We got there, originally I probably got there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and they didn't tell us until 2 o'clock in the morning about Alyssa, and so they kept asking us over and over the same information. What was Alyssa wearing? They were trying to identify her, but they kept asking us the same information, and I remember
When you say that, the police or the hospital, the school, or all of the above?
the police, the FBI, they kept asking us, "What was Alyssa wearing? How much did she weigh? How tall was she?" And then later that night, our rabbi was there, and I remember saying to Rabbi Gutnick, I said, "Please start to arrange the funeral arrangements for Alyssa."
Mm,
And he's like, "No, have faith." And I said, "No, this is important to do." And so he said, "Okay, I got this." As a mother, you just have this innate feeling that when something is wrong with your child. And Alyssa was the type of kid that she would find a way to contact me. She lived with her cell phone. And so I know that she would have been there at the reunification center or had contacted me in some capacity. But later that night at 2 o'clock in the morning, they eventually called us into the room and the FBI told us, well, first he didn't want to talk in front of me. And I said, no, just tell me, say whatever it is. And he said that Alyssa was unrecognizable, that she was
mm,
shot in the face and they couldn't see what she looked like anymore. And in the most painful, horrific moment of life, I was told the wrong information. Alyssa was shot 8 times. She was shot on top of the head and in the heart and in the femoral artery 8 times,
mm.
but she was recognizable. And they made us sign different paperwork and we had to drive our cars home. And we were obviously in no mindset to do anything like that.
sure. I'm sorry you had to absorb all that. And then, the other component that I think a lot of people don't realize is the community impact of a tragedy of that magnitude, or any tragedy, really. You already mentioned your rabbi, but in this instance, you have a whole school community, a whole town, a whole state, a whole country that is now zeroed in on this. When did it kick in that your family were now being wrapped up into something that was going to be larger? Was that immediate?
I think just in that moment of time, we were in survival mode,
Sure.
meaning like we just were trying to comprehend the unthinkable, comprehend that our daughter was just murdered in school. And so I don't really think at that moment we knew that there was a national conversation about this, or what part I would have in this conversation of school safety.
Right.
But as, a mom and wanting to keep Alyssa's memory alive and know that we need to try to fix this so this doesn't happen again and prevent the next school shooting. I knew that was going to be our focus and our mission, and that's why we started Make Our Schools Safe.
And that is what we really focus on here at the National Crime Prevention Council. People often ask me, well, McGruff is nice and he talks to kids and all that. Does McGruff ever get mad? McGruff gets mad when people blame victims. And why? Because we learn from victims, and victims can inspire us to prevent a crime. And if we can stop something bad from happening to someone, we should do all in our power to make that happen. And that's what you've done. And I think one of the remarkable things about Parkland and Sandy Hook in particular, the two schools of the sadly too many schools where this has happened, is the spirit of the parents and the community has risen above the tragedy. And that is what you've done with Make Our Schools Safe. And I always wonder, like you'd mentioned, you started realizing just as a mom, you needed to do something about her memory. How were those early conversations when, you clearly reached the point where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If there's purpose in this, this is where I'm going to find it. How did that process start? Because obviously, I run a nonprofit organization. You had to create one. You had to start talking to attorneys and other people to get involved. How was that process? And in your mind, you're like, okay, I'm a mom. I'm determined to do this. How did you start?
I think it was all just really instinctively, and knowing that I didn't want Alyssa's death to be in vain, and knowing that, she's not here right now physically. In spirit, she's always with me. I say that she lives within my heart, and I'm here to be Alyssa's voice. And so that is the mission and the power that is behind my drive to create safer school environments in schools. And every single day, it's my reason to get up every day, to keep being the driving focus, to make change, be an advocate, and know that I can make an impact, make a difference in this country to help to make our schools safe.
What was the immediate reaction in Florida from elected officials, local officials, religious leaders, others? Were people reaching out to you, or did you have to get loud first?
Well, I would say a couple things. One is, here in Florida in 2018, the legislation, they came together to pass the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act. This was a crucial piece of legislation that did couple things. One, it created where you had to be required to have a school resource officer or guardian on every single campus, whether it's an elementary school, middle school, or high school, every single day, to have someone there in case there's a threat. You have somebody there to take down the threat. And then second is, they passed the age to purchase a gun from 18 to 21. They did red flag laws and also different things with mental health. And Florida has truly been a leader in school safety for the last 7 years. Every single year, they have passed a school safety law. And so that's amazing how everybody has come together to make change and be a leader in this country for school safety.
Good. And when I talk about school safety, I equate it to fire safety because a lot of people don't realize that in the early part of the 20th century, the school fires were commonplace. There were a lot of school fires. And we said, okay, we had to do something about this. We changed zoning. We did fire drills. We did a lot of other things. And between the time of one of the earlier school shootings in Colorado and today, there have been 0 deaths due to school fires, yet we continue to have deaths from guns. So tell us a little bit more about what was in that law and what, you already mentioned the school resource officers. What about school safety drills and other things? What is going to school in Florida like today compared to what it was before?
Yeah, so we have absolutely created multiple layers of school safety protection, requiring drills, lockdown drills every single month, but not just Just that, we've also have the Florida Office of Safe Schools where they are now doing random checks at schools. They have like a bullet point checklist where they'll go into schools to make sure that their doors are locked. Every door is locked from the outside to the inside of the school classrooms. The doors are locked, which I think is definitely low hanging fruit for schools. Lock your doors. It's very
Right.
simple. And so it's so important that there's not complacency and that we are going in to make sure that these checks are being done. And so Florida has institute that where the Florida Office of Safe Schools will go in, make these checks. And then also at the school district level, they have those checks. We also implemented behavioral threat management systems. So if a student says they're going to shoot up a school, there will be a safety team that convenes and made up of law enforcement and mental health person, teacher. Whether they'll go through this checklist, basically to say whether it's a high level threat, medium level threat, or low level threat. And then they need to create a safety plan for that student. Maybe they have to have a backpack check every single day, or maybe they can't bring their backpack to school. So these are some of the things. Also, we've passed Alyssa's law here in Florida, which requires panic buttons in schools. And so we've done a lot, and we will continue to every year just refine laws and create additional laws to help to make schools as safe as possible.
So if we have a parent out there listening from another state who heard you talk about school resource officers and they're thinking, well, I was active on the local level to get the police out of the school and do away with school resource officers, what would you say to them?
So unfortunately, school shootings continue to happen in our country. And in order to prevent mass casualties and prevent further loss of life, we need to get a school resource officer, a police officer on campus, someone with a gun to take down the threat as quickly as possible. And so something like Alyssa's law, where you have a panic button that's pressed directly linked to law enforcement so they can get there faster, pull up cameras within the school, get eyes on the scene. We have to neutralize the threat. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is with somebody with a gun to take down the threat.
Good. Good answer. Good answer. So you talked about Alyssa's law passing in Florida, but that's not the only place. Tell us more. You should be
Yes.
proud.
So thank you. So we passed Alyssa's law first in the state of New Jersey, and we passed it in 10 states total: New Jersey, New York, Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Utah, Florida, Oregon, Washington State, and Georgia. And
It's a
Alyssa's
nice
law,
mix of blue and red states too.
yes, it's nonpartisan issue. Think of it as like in your banks you have panic buttons, and so they press those panic buttons to get help there faster. Our elderly have the wearable panic button to, if they've fallen, right, have fallen and they can't get up, they press their panic button. And so these panic buttons are vital to have in be able to respond to these emergencies faster. Time equals life. And the faster that we can get help on the scene, the more lives that we'll save. And predominantly, these panic buttons are going to be used in medical emergencies. So whether someone has a seizure or stops breathing. And the panic buttons are also layered in with mapping systems so that law enforcement can see where the assets are, meaning the AEDs, the stop the bleed kit, and they can bring those resources to the scene faster to be able to help anybody in a medical emergency.
Wow. So you went from PE teacher, mom, to a legislative list of wins that would make any high-paid lobbyist in Washington, D.C. green with envy. How did you learn how to become an advocate? It doesn't sound like you had to learn. It just sounded like you did it.
Right. Like it's, I lead with my heart and passion to be able to have this, voice for change and advocacy. And so, it's just I think just inside me. It's not like I was taught how to do this. I just do it, right? You've got to take action to make change. And if you just sit there quietly and you don't speak up, I was actually a very shy person before this, but I knew that I needed to do this for Alyssa.
Good for you. Good for you. As we like to say, everyone can take a bite out of crime, and you are proof of that. Clearly, you're acting on, I would say, mom power. Help our listeners out in terms of things that people can do, ordinary people, other moms out there, other dads, other people, other gym teachers out there. What are some tangible things people can do?
So if you go to our website, makeourschoolsafe.org, we do have, we call it Moss Moms and Moss Dads. Moss stands for Make Our School Safe. And we have Moss Clubs where it's student-led safety clubs, but we can take action. You can start a fundraiser. Maybe you don't have a Stop the Bleed kit in every classroom of your school. Well, we will help you. We will work with you to start a fundraiser at your school and help you raise money to then get those Stop the Leak kits in your school. One person, one voice can make an impact and make a difference. And I'd also say another important part is that as parents, you need to know what's going on in the safety of your child's school. You need to go to school board meetings, hear what they're passing, know what your safety policies are. And if they're lacking things like a locking door policy, then you need to speak up and say something and hold your elected officials accountable.
Good, good. No, those are very tangible, doable steps everyone can take. And if anybody has any other thoughts, please put them in the comments because, we learn by sharing. Whenever there's a school shooting, the political debate, I think, gets a little divisive and turns to you need this or that. Now, in Florida, you did pass some changes to gun ownership laws, which on the national level, and we're recording this in week 3.5 of a federal government shutdown. So nothing is passing Congress, but assuming Congress should return, what do we need on the national level that's missing right now?
Yeah, so we are waiting for the government to reopen. We have a bill called Alyssa's Act, which will help to create standards around emergency response. Congressman Burgess Owens is going to be filing this bill. And so, like you brought up before about the fires and the fire alarms, they have a lot of standards surrounding putting fire alarm pole stations in schools and sprinklers in schools. And we haven't had a fire and someone die in a school since the 90s, but we continue to have school shootings. So what we're trying to do is through Alyssa's Act is to create standards around emergency response. And then our hope is then at the state level, we'll pass Alyssa's law in all states to have the panic button to be used in an emergency situation. But it's very important that we have these standards around emergency response.
I've got to ask this question because what you've outlined makes absolute common sense. Why hasn't it passed already? What do people possibly say in opposition to this? Or is there opposition? Is it just more a matter of we just got to get this done?
Yeah, so this is a new twist on Alyssa's Act this year at the federal level. And so it'll be the first time it's being filed, hopefully soon, to create these standards around emergency response. So honestly, like I have, just speaking to people in the safety world, there has not been pushback about this. Everybody agrees this is a great idea. So I'm very optimistic that we can pass this and create those standards around emergency response. So we could also then get Alyssa's law in our schools. And, every parent should be asking the question, what happens if there is an emergency on campus? What happens at my child's school if there's a medical emergency? What happens if there is an active shooter on campus? What is the school's plan from A to Z? From taking down the threat, how do you have that mass notification? Because when that panic button is pushed, it's mass notification in within seconds. So teachers get response that there is an active shooter on campus, law enforcement too. And so these are vital questions as a parent you need to be asking your school and how your school is responding. What are those layers they're
Right.
putting in place?
Right. Interesting the term panic button, because as you told the story of that day, you're driving, you get closer, you're getting text messages. Probably at some point there were things on news on the radio or something, probably. And then you get there and you end up parking on the sidewalk and you're walking in more confusion and panic, I'm sure was the operative word that day. And a panic button would help take away that panic. Is that an accurate read of it?
Yeah, listen, it's giving, I talk about kind of empowering the teachers to be able to reach help faster in that awful panic situation. So this panic button was actually used in the Appalachia shooting. And Unfortunately, people did die in that shooting, but 9 lives were saved. The teacher kept pressing their panic button, help got there faster, and saved the 9 people that were shot. And that's something I wish Alyssa and the 16 others had that day on our awful tragedy. I wish we had a guy in a golf cart when the gunman walked onto campus with his gun bag. I wish he had a panic button because then, Alyssa and could have gone hypothetically into her safety protocols. She was in the direct line of shot from the window of the door where the shooter shot directly at Alyssa. And we hope to give them time to be able to get behind something hard, get behind the locked door. And unfortunately, they didn't have a panic button. They didn't have locked doors. And yeah, sadly,
There you
Alyssa
go.
will be here.
I want to ask a little bit more about the community and go there a little bit, because I think a lot of people, it's hard to get your head around it for obvious reasons. But when a community is impacted, it's a very broad impact. And if we can avoid that, all the better. You mentioned Alyssa's best friend. How is she doing today? I mean, how are the other students, classmates? What's the mindset? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
It's difficult, it's painful, and when you hear of another school shooting, it's also triggering. Every February 14th, every Valentine's Day will be sad for them. It doesn't, like, think of it like almost like a roller coaster of trauma. But some days, like, just something, it could be a song, it could be walking in the grocery store and seeing Alyssa's favorite food,
Hmm.
and it could be very triggering. And so that trauma, unfortunately, it stays with us forever. And I think we all try to deal with it in certain ways, but it's painful. It's generational. I know my brother has a child who was only 5 years old when Alyssa died, but it's painful to her, today. Hard.
It is, and just as a parent listening to this, I'm feeling the pain. I fortunately never had to live that, but there was an incident several years ago in high school, and I got a panic text message from my son. There was an active shooter drill, and he was in gym class in the locker room, and he's texting me, not knowing what's going to happen in the next 2 minutes, and that we have to live like this. And we're thankful for parents like you who are ringing the alarm bell and saying we need to do more. Who have been the allies? Who've been your helpers along?
So definitely my community has helped me through this the last 7.5 years. My friends, my family, my cousin and niece in New York, they helped me for years to try to get Alyssa's Law passed in New York. And so we've had helpers, I would say, around the country just to support the mission, support Make Our School Safe, support Alyssa's Law, and support our mosque clubs. And I say join the school safety movement.
There you go. So for you listeners out there, makeourschoolsafe.org. You want to navigate there too after you finish watching this episode, because Lori's going to continue to give us some just great information and great heartfelt stories of action. So Make Our Schools Safe movement. Tell us a little bit more about what's going on in some other states. How does it catch fire? Say if there's someone else listening out there, they say, okay, I want to have this in Kansas or wherever.
So I would say it could just as simply be an email reaching out and connecting with me. And just having a conversation. And then also through our mosque clubs, our student-led safety clubs in high schools and middle schools, that students are really helping to create the culture of safety within their school. And, when the tragedy happened, if you remember, the kids were very vocal and speaking up and started March for Our Lives. Well, I wanted kids to speak up and be vocal about school safety. And so through the mosque clubs, we have a link on our website. You can reach out to us. We'll provide additional information. It's a free program. There is a Mosque Club handbook, kind of walks through how to start the Mosque Club and what activities that they do. And the students are just amazing. Some of them are going to their capital and asking to pass Alyssa's Law. We had a Mosque Club student, they went to their school board meeting and say, why don't we have panic buttons in schools, right? You don't have to necessarily have a law to get panic buttons in schools, but they wanted that additional layer of safety protection, knowing that could get help there faster.
Well, that sounds great, and we've got to link up more. We have something called McGruff's Prevention Posse, which is an effort to mobilize teens around crime prevention issues, and where a lot of people complain that their teenager spends too much time online. Well, we're going to give them creative, positive ways to spend time online by spreading safety message and be advocates. So we should definitely link up on that.
Absolutely.
Get more teens involved. That's what we need. That's what we need. More people involved. Tell us a little bit more about that teen involvement. I think our young people are the solution for a lot of things we're dealing with today, and I don't think you can start early enough.
Right. So it's about building that relationship with our students, knowing our students' names. And through the Moss Club, they form that connection and that bond. Their squad, and they have meetings, and they have different school safety activities. Like, for example, this week is school safety week. So we have different clubs doing school safety activities, and we help them, we give them ideas, but they also come up with their own ideas. It's really quite amazing. This Friday we're doing a Moss Club activity. We're doing skate for school safety at our Panthers ice den. So we did the signups. We already have 150 kids signed up to go, and Make Our School Safe is going to pay for every one of those kids to go. And so it's really incredible about the movement and the connection and the bond. And I think kids are tired of maybe just feeling like they can't do anything. So this empowers them to be able to have a voice, to be able to speak up about safety and know that they can make an impact and make a change in their school.
Great, great. And kids can make an impact. Everyone can make an impact. And, you've got that number showed, and someone once told me for every one person you have, at least 100 people in their network are going to hear about it. So keep doing the math on that. If you get 100 people involved and then you turn that into 1,000 people and then 2,000, and that's how you make movement happen and make movement forward. And that's what we need. Tell us about challenges in starting a nonprofit. The fundraising component, you mentioned hosting local fundraisings, and how do you keep going, and how do you make time to still be a mom and be a regular person?
Right. So, you're always kind of like, I'm a very creative person, so I'm always trying to think out of the
That's clear.
box, you know. Right. Like, so this year, I mean, we do a golf fundraiser, a tennis fundraiser, and a Live for Alyssa gala. Those are kind of our three staple fundraisers that we do. But like, we just did a pickleball tournament because, like, that's really hot now. Like, everybody wants to play pickleball. And so I'm always trying to think of creative ideas. One of my good friends, they're doing a Halloween party. And I was like, hey, you get hundreds of people to this Halloween party. Could we just do like a little donation table for Make Our Schools Safe? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I think it's just trying to be creative, think out of the box type of activities, but it's definitely something that takes a lot of energy. I do try to find time for myself. I'm on a tennis team, and I try to work out and spend time with my husband. And we're empty nesters now. Our boys are at Florida State University, which actually, if you remember last year, they did have a shooting at their school,
Yes.
which
I was about to ask what went through
yeah.
your mind, because I'm almost afraid to ask, but
Yeah, it was very frightening and painful. And luckily my one son was there and was able to get to safety and wasn't affected. But it's traumatizing. It still brings back all the feelings of, him losing his sister and the tragedy and the school shooting. And at first they thought maybe there was more than one shooter. They thought there was two shooters. They didn't know. That was really difficult, and we kept getting the messages from FSU. I mean, they did a good job communicating, but it was hard. So Make Our School Safe, we just donated $250,000 to FSU for school safety at their school.
congratulations on that. That's a big step. There are a lot of people who feel frustrated about the debate over school shootings, and a lot of people who just feel frustrated in general that as a society, we can't seem to get our act together and do much. What do you say to the naysayers, the negative people?
Well, we have to do more than nothing, and don't just be so negative about it. Know that you can make an impact and make a difference, and it starts with you at your school. Whether you just join the PTO or PTA, but be involved and know that you make a difference. Like, you might see a safety vulnerability. You might see a door propped open with a pencil, and that's a problem. But say something about it. Don't sit back. Don't be complacent. We have these apps where you see something, say something, you report something. That makes a difference. That prevents things from happening. I mean, there was just the family that turned in their own family member who was going to shoot up an airport, right? And the police got to that guy before he did harm. But know that you can make an impact and difference, and not just sit silently. Don't be complacent. Don't live in a bubble. Like, we lived in this Parkland bubble where we thought everything was perfect, and it wasn't. And really try to peel back the layers and understand what safety measures are in place at your school, what policies are in place, and go to makeourschoolsafe.org and go to the Florida Office of Safe Schools and do your research, do your homework, and know that you can make an impact.
And it's never too early to start. One question I get a lot on just crime issues in general, whether it's guns, drugs, or violence or whatever, is when is it time to talk to your child about it? And I want to get your answer, and then I'll tell you my answer. But something tells me they're going to be very similar.
I mean, I think it's a difficult conversation. I even know, even with my two boys after Alyssa was killed, it's hard to talk about it, but I do think it's important to educate them. One of the things that I was personal to me is I required my boys to have a bulletproof backpack. It's not 100% bulletproof, but I felt like in order for them to go to school, they needed to have that as like the last line of defense if they had nothing else. But it's important to keep kind of talking about it, having the conversations, knowing what the safety protocols are, knowing what to do, because a lot of this is training and muscle memory. In that emergency situation, the body goes into fight or flight. And to be able to respond, can save your life. And it's not something just that, unfortunately, now these shootings are happening not just at schools, but everywhere. And so we have to be mindful and vigilant and know, what to do and how to protect ourselves.
It very much is a community issue. And as you point out, the way you build a community is you start with yourself and you take action. Any other thoughts as we wrap up of key things people should keep in mind?
Well, the other part that we didn't really talk about is the mental health aspect of all of this. And I think it's really important that we call it mental fitness. Fitness meaning, when you exercise, you make your body look good, but mental fitness is exercising your brain. And it's something that we don't really think about because there's a stigma attached to mental health. And so I think it's super important. I think that in the students and through the Moss Clubs, they're breaking that stigma. They want to talk about their mental fitness and what they could do to have those resiliency skills, build up those leadership skills so that they could deal with the stress in their life in a healthy way.
Good. Absolutely good advice, and important, because a lot of times we think this is hard to talk about. People don't want to deal with it, but you find out once you open that door and you start the conversation, people do, because it's so important.
It's like when someone breaks their arm, they have a cast around it, and you could see that, but you can't see what's going on in here. And so to have that conversation, that balloon, pop it, open it up, start talking about it, and it will relieve a lot of stress, and I think ultimately help our young people deal with their mental health.
Wow. Well, I have enjoyed this conversation and inspired by your actions. I sort of want to reach across the camera and hug you, but I send my love for what you lived through, what you've overcome. But I think more importantly, I'm going to go to sleep a little better tonight, knowing what you're doing tomorrow and hoping that this time that we spent together, someone out there listening who's already clicked like and subscribe is going to wake up tomorrow and do something too, and that they're going to go online to makeourschoolsafe.org, or they're going to write a letter, or they're going to make a phone call, and they're going to do something. But thank you so much for not only just joining us, but for everything you've done and everything you're going to do tomorrow and the day after and the day after that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And thanks for joining us.
That's an easy way to take a bite out of crime.